Good morning, boys and girls. Today is Wednesday, March 25th. Yesterday, we read The Invention of Gum and we planned out together how gum was invented. So, if you haven't already pulled this up, make sure that you have this out. We're not going to the next folder yet, so if you have if you have Wednesday's writing up, we're not doing that yet. We're still working on the Tuesday writing. So if you are just tuning in now, um, excuse me, you want to open up the Tuesday, March 24th folder and find your writing in there. Your prompt will be in there as well as this reading passage in the ELA folder. Now, let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay, so yesterday, just to kind of recap what we talked about, we read The Invention of Gum and we highlighted some evidence. And I'm going to go back right now. I'm going to re-highlight that evidence because I don't believe I was able to save the evidence highlighted here. So the prompt we were answering was, how was gum invented? And we came up with three ways together. We talked about how gum was invented by accident. A general in the Mexican army, excuse me, had a big role in this because he wanted to use this substance, this chicle, um, to make a substitute for rubber, and that didn't work out. And then we had this man by the name of Thomas Andrews, and he was an American inventor who ended up kind of discovering gum as we know it. So let's go back real quick and let me highlight these in the passage so you can see what I'm talking about as we talk. And you know what? Let's actually go back and let me label the paragraphs here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and let's take a look at our. So we first talked about how gum was an accident. This was our first piece of evidence, so we'll put a number 1 right there. And then we talked about the general in the Mexican army. General in the Mexican army wanted to use the chicle. Okay, and that was our second piece of evidence. And our third piece of evidence was the American inventor, Thomas Andrews. And we're going to underline this piece that we talked about yesterday. One day he popped the chicle into his mouth. He chewed it, and he liked it. Yum. Okay, so now that we have that, we have our evidence back here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to write this together. So again, maybe you have a little bit different plan than Mr. Gilbert. Let me get that out of the way. But I'm going to use the 3 bullet points here, the 1, 2, 3 that we talked about yesterday. So go ahead right now. Let's get started. Let's start with your topic sentence. And we wrote a topic sentence yesterday, so I'm going to type mine down, but feel free to use whatever you want as your topic sentence. Make sure you're indenting that paragraph. And here we go. So I said the story of how chewing gum was invented is a very interesting story. Oh, forgot my period there. I said I yesterday wanted to kind of change things up a bit, but again, you could flip that question around and say, here are 3 ways that gum was invented, or something along those lines. So go ahead, and if you don't already have it, write your topic sentence down. And let's go ahead and let's start with our first detail. So our first detail we're going to be writing about today is the accident. Gum was accidentally invented, and let's go back and just take a look at that in our passage. Let's reread that line. It starts right here. Let me get my little chewing gum was invented this way. It came about by an accident. So this line right here is what we're going to try to use in our writing. Of course, we're going to put it into our own words, but I think it's a good way to start out our passage. Now, something I see or have seen in the past, and just want to make sure that you guys aren't doing it at home, and make sure you're indenting. Take a look right here. Here's my indentation. I'm going to highlight that blank space. You should be indenting your writing. So your first sentence here, your topic sentence, should not start at the edge of your paper. All right. And then something I've seen in the past is a lot of students will do this. They will go down to the next line and they're indent and they're say, gum was invented, dot, dot, dot. I don't want you to do that. In fact, for this, I want you to start right here, okay? Because we're writing one paragraph today, one piece of uh, sorry, one paragraph, one essay. So start right here, unless we're actually changing the subject, which we're not in this case. So go ahead and write your first detail down right now. Okay, so if you don't or did not have a chance to finish that first detail, pause it and unpause it when you're done. I'm going to go back and I want to show you my thoughts, and let's stretch this next detail out. So I also really like this line here. I'm wondering how I can break this first detail up into possibly more than one sentence, because we know chewing gum from the passage was invented by accident, but I think I want to put something else in my writing, like other inventions happen almost by accident, and then kind of use this to kind of lead into chewing gum, of course, was also accidentally invented. So let's go ahead. Let's start my first detail sentence. And I'm going to say some inventions were created accidentally. Chewing. So again, as I kind of just said, based on the passage here, the first part of the passage, let me see if I can highlight this. The first part of the passage here says other inventions happen almost by accident. I kind of liked this bit, and it kind of is a good lead into what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to start with this, and then we are going to move into how chewing gum was invented. So let's go back to our our writing, and let me read you what I have. I have some inventions were created accidentally. So again, flipping that around, don't copyright from the text. Put it in your own words, and then trying to tie it back again, how it was invented. Chewing gum is a great example of an accidental invention. So we're not completely getting into how it was invented here as far as our topic sentence. How was gum invented? We are talking about how it was an accidental invention, but we're going to elaborate on that in details 2 and details 3 with the general in the Mexican Army and Thomas Adams. So right now, go ahead and write your second detail sentence for me. Again, your sentence might be a little different than mine. I'm going to go back and read the passage to remind myself exactly what I'm going to be writing about. Okay, so I'm going to move on. If you're still writing, pause it, and when you're done, unpause the video. Um, let's go ahead and let's talk about this. So if you come down here right now to paragraph number 4, I'm going to read it so I can kind of remind myself and think aloud to you so you know exactly what my thoughts are. Paragraph 4 says, what we call chewing gum was made by chance. People in Mexico like to chew something called chicle. This was a sap from the sapodilla trees. Here's the piece that we pulled out. A general in the Mexican army wanted to use the chicle. He wanted to sell a cheaper alternative to rubber. Now, could we just go and write about the general in the Mexican army and using chicle? Absolutely. But I think explaining what chicle is also kind of an important thing here. So let's kind of give a little bit of background knowledge to our reader when they're reading our passage here. So let's go ahead and let's pull up our writing again. Okay. And let's talk about our general. So let's say something along the lines of Let's say there was a general in the Mexican army who, let's go back. I'm just going to kind of keep going back and forth. Who wanted to use I believe it was SAP. Yep. Want to make sure. Again, do what I'm doing. If you get stuck here, go back and forth. Make sure everything is right from the text. So we're saying there was a general in the Mexican army who wanted to use SAP, called Chick-fil-A. Let me make sure I spelled that right. Chick-fil-A, yes. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to explain a little bit more about that connection between the Chick-fil-A and the gum as we know it. So let's actually come back here. Let's go back to our piece. And let's talk about how this general wanted to use Chick-fil-A to, let's say, replace rubber. It talks about how he wants to use it as an alternative to rubber. And again, this doesn't actually explain how gum was formed. This Mexican general in the army didn't invent gum as we know it, but it all leads up to Thomas Adams, who then takes the Chick-fil-A and then actually makes the gum as we know it. So there was a general in the Mexican army who wanted to use sap called Chick-fil-A. This general wanted to use Chick-fil-A to replace rubber. And now we can go into this third detail. And this third detail is really how we're going to all tie it together. So let's go back and let's take a look at Thomas Adams here. An American inventor became involved. His name was Thomas Adams. He could not get the Chick-fil-A to work as a substitute for rubber. He used the Chick-fil-A to try to invent other things. One day he popped it into his mouth and he chewed it and he liked it. Okay. So let's go back now and let's tie this all together. I'm going to say, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and write your third detail before we do it together and see what you come up with. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and proceed. If you need more time, just pause the video and unpause it when you're done. And let's go ahead and talk about Thomas Adams. I'm going to say there was an American inventor, named Thomas Adams. Make sure you capitalize that because it's a proper noun. Now, once again, you're going to have to write more than one sentence for this explanation. Just like most in these in this paragraph, you're going to have to write more than one sentence to really explain it because the reader's not going to know what is happening if you just say Thomas Adams invented gum. That's not exactly correct. There was a long process before that that led up to the invention of gum. So you want to really stretch these details out. So my first sentence, there was an American inventor named Thomas Adams. Now I'm going to talk about that connection. Let's go back and actually take a look at that. I'm going to talk about that connection now, how he wanted to work as a substitute for rubber, but of course it didn't work, and then he chewed it and he liked it. Okay, that's what I'm going to go and start writing about. So let's go ahead and let's do that. Thomas Adams tried to use clay as rubber. However, it didn't work. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for just a second. And I want you to take a look at this third detail. So I'm going to highlight it here. You can see that it is a big detail, and it looks like what I write right now: 1, 2, 3 sentences, and I'm not done. But I want to pause and just again kind of explain my thought process here. I went and said there's an American inventor named Thomas Adams, so that we talked about. Thomas Adams tried to use Chick-fil-A as rubber. And going right back to the text, he was trying to do what the general in the Mexican army wanted and make this as a substitute for what we know as rubber. However, it didn't work. One day, excuse me, Thomas Adams decided to put the Chick-fil-A into his mouth, and here's where we actually finally explain how gum was invented. So let's say something along the lines of Thomas Adams loved it, and here again we can go back to the text and let's actually look at this last paragraph here, this paragraph 6, to say today gum is sorry, actually let's bump back up to 5 and then go into 6. He added a flavor to the Chick-fil-A. This was the first use of chewing gum. Today the gum is very popular product in stores, yada yada yada. So I think right here is a really good concluding sentence for us for Thomas Adams. So he loved it. And then let's say T. Adams. No, I'm just kidding. Thomas. We can say Thomas. Let's change it up a little bit. Added some flavor to the Chick-fil-A and invented gum. Okay, so you can see that this last detail where we, again, have been talking through this piece of writing is a pretty meaty piece of writing, a pretty meaty detail. We not don't only have one sentence, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences for this detail. And this is, again, we're always trying to tie it back to that topic sentence of how gum was invented. Let's go and let's write our concluding sentence right now. Please write your concluding sentence. And we'll come back together in a few moments. Okay, so let's write our concluding sentence together. Excuse me. If you need more time, just pause it again, and we'll come back together when you're done. So let's take a look at the question we were answering originally. How was gum invented? And we, as a topic sentence, wrote the story of chewing gum was invented in a very interesting way. I want to change it up again. I don't want to be very repetitive in my writing. This is a good chance to say something a little bit differently to wrap up our piece of writing here. So I'm going to write was invented. All right. So I originally was going to write something a little bit different, but I ended up with the story of how gum was invented is a crazy story. All right. So again, just trying to keep things a little bit different. How was gum invented? We talked about how chewing gum was invented. It was an interesting story, so we're wrapping it up with that line. You can again write anything you want for that concluding line as long as it ties back to that topic sentence. Um, Once again, let's just take a look at the amount of writing we did today. We have one sentence, our topic sentence, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have 12 sentences here. Once again, I'm not counting the sentences so that you have to write 12 sentences. I'm simply counting the sentences so you know about how long a second grade piece of writing is. In this paragraph, you don't want to just be writing one detail per per line here, right? The accident and the general in the Mexican army, we did have shorter. Maybe we had like 2 sentences each for these, but then again, Thomas Adams, a big player in how gun was invented, he had 5 sentences. So again, it's not always sticking to that formula of 2 sentences, tie it back, 2 sentences, tie it back. Sometimes you got to change it up. So I'd love to hear from you guys today. Send me some of your writing, take a picture of it, email it to me, um, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow, and we will write together. All right. Bye, everybody.